Hi, it's Knuckle. One novel that's followed me everywhere this year and that I finally finished is 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Let's just read one of the reviews on the back cover. 100 Years of Solitude is the first piece of literature since the book of Genesis that should be required reading for the entire human race. It takes up not long after Genesis left off and carries through to the Air Age, reporting on everything that happened in between with more lucidity, wit, wisdom, and poetry than is expected from 100 years of novelists, let alone one man, Mr. Garcia Marquez. So I think it's interesting here that the reviewer likens the book to Genesis, right? Why Genesis? Why a biblical book and not, say, the Odyssey or some sort of epic piece of literature that would be more common to liken a novel to? I think it's possibly because this novel feels almost a bit biblical in that it spans several generations of people and yet tells each story of each of these individual characters in a deeply intimate and solitary way. And each of these characters' quirks and desires and fears and journeys feel quite archetypal of human existence and of human struggle overall. If you think of the Bible, there are so many different generations of characters, and yet we can pull out and discuss certain figures and their solitary struggles in this world, and identify those with aspects of our own lived experience. And that's in many ways how this novel feels. So I thought that comparison was quite fitting, especially as I got to the very end of this novel where everything really pulled together in a beautiful way. So this novel spans across several generations of the Buendia family, who all inhabit the same house. So people inhabit the same rooms that their great-grandparents once inhabited, and they might encounter the same artifacts that their ancestors encountered in these rooms. And in fact, they sometimes cohabit with earlier generations. So for instance, Ursula, who's one of the first characters in the novel, lives long enough to cohabit this house with her children, grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren. So the title is 100 Years of Solitude, and I would say that those are the two dominant themes, right? 100 years, so time, and solitude, so solitude. There's a lot to be said about time in this novel. The novel doesn't say any one thing about time. It doesn't say any one thing about anything, but one dominant theme is that time is not passing, but rather turning in a circle. So Ursula, as I mentioned before, lives to see a lot of generations inhabit the same house. And she watches each of those generations almost relive the lives of their ancestors, falling into similar obsessions, encountering similar trials, etc. There are also periods in this novel where time slows or becomes foggy. So one of the characters' children might go off to pursue studies abroad, and they may keep delaying their diplomas or taking on additional degrees. So their return date keeps getting delayed, and for their mother, time starts to sort of become foggy during that period. Characters may also become so enraptured with life that they lose sense of time altogether. Time is also intimately connected with memory, so Ursula lives long enough to cohabit this house with her great-grandchildren, and she recounts stories to them of her own great-grandparents and people of those generations. And so her great-great-grandchildren seem to vividly know these people through Ursula's memory, even though they died long before these children were even born. Solitude is another major theme. So a character may defy their parents and run off and seek their own adventures and become solitary. Or a couple may run off together, so even though they're together, they're isolated from everyone else and thus solitary. Characters' obsessions may also lead them into solitude, like if they become obsessed with work, for instance, or with the quest for knowledge and curiosity. Even when characters get into relationships with each other, we see each of these characters' individual solitary stories before and during the relationship. We're not just seeing a couple as one unit, but as two individuals with deeply solitary stories, with distinct backgrounds and identities, with deeply individual ways of approaching the relationship, with different reasons and ways of seeking fulfillment from these relationships, and different ways of giving and receiving love. Characters are also sometimes brought together through solitude. Solitude becomes something we can share. And I definitely relate to this in my 20s. One of the things that I feel has brought me closer to some of my friends is that shared feeling of solitude that I think a lot of people experience in their 20s. And solitude is also something that brought me to literature itself. I've always had the desire to really know another person in ways that only a novel can show you. This book spans several generations, and there really is no central plot, as you can probably tell from the way I'm describing it. But there is a beginning and there is an end, and that's something really beautiful about this novel. Read the first few pages and you will see it is from the beginning that it is very much a beginning. And certainly the last few pages definitely feel like a beautiful ending. And everything in between is the chaos and messiness of life articulated in beautiful prose that you won't regret reading. So I hope you enjoyed, and I don't believe I gave too much away.